Vegas Nation sponsored by Station Casino's STN Sports. Download the app and get a bonus up to $100 when you sign up.
You're listening to Vegas Nation. Time to get it started with First and 10 with Vinny Bonsignore and Sam Gordon.
What is good, Raider Nation? Welcome back to Vegas Nation First and 10, your weekly go-to for Raider news and analysis. We're in this beautiful studio, Sam Gordon.
Yeah, welcome back, Vinny.
Feels
good to be here.
Yeah,
huh?
it does feel good to be here. It's hot outside, or getting hotter outside. You can always tell because when you walk in and it's nice and cool, because the air conditioner is on. So it'll probably be on for the next 6 months.
Yeah, I would say so. That sounds about right. At least.
The heat is coming. There's no, it always, because it was cold here for a while.
Yeah, windy.
It was cold here,
rainy,
and windy, and just erratic. The weather was kind of erratic. But then there's always this turning point in Las Vegas where there's no turning back. It's going to be hot for the rest of the summer, spring, summer, a little bit of the fall. But before we get to what we need to get to today, and there's a lot to talk about with the Raiders, as always, just want to remind everybody that First and 10 and all of the podcasts here on Vegas Nation are brought to you by STN Sports, the Blue Wire, and of course, the Las Vegas Review-Journal. But Sam, how are we doing today?
Doing good, Vinny. Doing good. It's crunch time, right? We're about 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. I mean, 2 weeks from, we're recording this on Wednesday afternoons, 2 weeks from Thursday from the NFL draft, and we're right around the corner. So I think the offseason in a lot of ways, like it will for every other team, is going to crystallize for the Raiders, but especially with the Raiders having so many draft picks and so many needs on the defensive side of the ball, we're going to have some answers to some questions that I think we've had, I think that fans have had for quite some time. We'll know a lot more in 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it's always interesting because this time of year, I feel like there's so much time and there's so much information, and a lot of times feel like you kind of focus on the bad part of it rather than the good part of it. Like this is what the time of year where people almost started talking themselves out of drafting good prospects. And just to share a quick story, I used to work for the Lakers way back in the day, right? And I would love we would have cabinets of old scouting reports. I'm talking about legendary players, right? But if you took out the name and just read the scouting report, you're like, this guy stinks. Oh, that's Larry Bird. I'm sorry. That's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That's like the flaws are just so pronounced. Right? And it feels like, we start focusing a lot on the flaws rather than some of the strengths. And I do wonder in this draft group, and let's start with the quarterbacks, because if you look at the quarterbacks, are we talking about it? Is there a Patrick Mahomes in this class?
I would say it's unlikely.
What would you say the highest end, if you were to make a comp of C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson? What's of those four players? What's the highest comp that you would give in a contemporary player, or maybe a recent past?
I think Anthony Richardson, from an upside perspective, right? He might not be the safest bet. I think Bryce Young, where he stands right now with what he's good at, his strengths, I think, are most ready to translate to the NFL level.
So who's Bryce Young to you? Who's Bryce Young to you?
Well, he's an accurate distributor of the football.
I'm saying who
does he remind me of?
Yes, like who is he? Who's your best case scenario comp for Bryce Young? Serious, like I'm struggling with this, Sam.
Best case scenario.
Best case.
Probably like a Russell Wilson. Best case.
Best case.
Yeah. A guy who's been around for a long time, accurate with the football, can move a little bit, can make all the throws. The size has, I think, affected him in certain situations, but not every situation. He's worked around it. Great maturity. C.J. Stroud. Oh, geez. What do you think?
I don't think it's Patrick Mahomes.
No.
And I don't think it's Joe Burrow.
Right.
I don't think it's Justin Herbert.
Yeah. I think Anthony Richardson has Josh Allen kind of upside, if you can tap into that, but far from a guarantee, right? With what we've seen so far.
Could Stroud be a Jalen Hurts kind of guy? Could Anthony Richardson be a
Jalen Hurts, top 5-6 quarterback?
Well, he wasn't. He wasn't coming into that.
You're 100% right.
That's the weird thing about all this.
It's imperfect. Yeah. It's an imperfect process, right? The most productive rookie quarterback that played this past season, 2022, was Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy.
Right.
Who, of course, he inherited a great situation, but nonetheless, he was really good.
Right.
And it's possible. I mean, it's not possible. It's obvious there were some flaws in the scouting process.
I agree. And let's take it back to Brock Purdy. You can make the argument, well, he was on a great team. Yeah, but that didn't stop a bunch of bad quarterbacks that couldn't take advantage when Jimmy G went out.
Absolutely.
And they went into the trash can.
Yep.
The Nick Mullenses of the world, guys that just couldn't get it done. There were a few of them. That's why the 49ers record with Jimmy Garoppolo was so good, and it was so bad without him. They were good teams, but they weren't so good that you could just stick anybody in there. And as we saw in the NFC Championship game, you still can't do that.
Brock Purdy, clearly a good quarterback. Clearly.
You have to give him. Right.
Yeah, Mr. Irrelevant, not Mr. Irrelevant. You'd think, based on what we saw this past season, that he probably, with a do-over, would have been drafted way higher. There were some flaws in that process.
Right. I would say, okay, so when we're talking about this particular, let's play it forward.
Yeah.
If you were to talk right now, based off what you saw last year, Caleb Williams, are you talking? I'm the name Patrick Mahomes is coming into
Caleb Williams was far and away the best. Was the best package of total package of what he won the Heisman Trophy. Right. That's for a reason. The way he was able to move, improvise off script, play from the pocket. He does a lot of the things that Patrick Mahomes does well. We saw that at the college level.
Right. There were some Patrick Mahomes in there.
Absolutely.
There was
some moments.
There was, when you watch Caleb Williams, you go, Super Bowl could be in his future. Like, we put him on a good team, and what he can do to elevate himself, his teammates, make plays on the run, make something out of nothing.
Absolutely.
All of those types of things, you feel like, okay, Caleb Williams is kind of that guy. I'm not so sure that anybody in this class is or that guy. Yeah. But it's just it's how it is.
And you just don't know. It's a very, very imperfect process right now. With that being said, Caleb Williams, I think if he was in this draft, would be, I think, clear cut the best prospect.
Doubt about it.
So, what does that mean for the Raiders? What does it mean for where they're at?
Okay, and let's talk about what it means for the Raiders. Where they are at number 7, I don't think they're going to have access to any of at least the top 3: Richardson, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and maybe not even Will Levis. Not to say that Will would be in their world anyway, even at number 7. All right, so that's why if you're talking about trading up, is there a guy that you would trade up for in this draft? Like, let's say there's a surprise at number 1 or number 2. Let's say Houston doesn't even draft a quarterback at number 2, and one of the 3 or 2 of the 3 actually falls to number 3. Is there anybody that you would trade up for and give up pretty big assets for?
No.
None.
Not for me right now. If I was running the team.
If Bryce Young fell to number 3.
Maybe Bryce Young would be the guy.
If C.J. Stroud fell to number 3.
I still don't know because.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative.
No. This is good because this isn't a ready-made roster yet. Like the defense, it's a ready-made offense, but do you want to give up assets when you don't? Do you want to put your rookie quarterback in a position where he's taking over a defense that's not going to be maxed out? This is the Raiders have a lot of draft capital to rebuild their defense right now, to get that, not rebuild, build a defense right now, a surplus of draft picks and a premium pick at number 7. I just don't know. Now, if it was a Caleb Williams,
I was just going to say, because that's a completely different conversation.
It's a different story.
Like if you were to say you're starting with Patrick Mahomes, now you go build a team around him, you would take that
100 times out of 100, right? Because he's shown that you don't have to have a perfect. And it's not a knock to say that a quarterback's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. There's at most 2 or 3, 4 quarterbacks in the league at a given time that is going to be able to kind of transcend maybe holes of other rosters and with his individual greatness, be able to kind of make up for what a team lacks maybe elsewhere on the offensive line, on the defensive side of the ball. To answer your question, Vinny, nobody in this draft, I don't see a transcendent kind of player in this particular draft. Now, if somebody falls to number 7, or if it's a pick swap and 1 draft pick way later on, something like that, then potentially, sure. But if I'm running the team, I'm not giving up next year's first. Right. I'm not giving up a second, third. Like, no, there's too many holes. There's too many opportunities with this draft capital. This is the Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels' first real. I mean, the trade from Devontae Adams affected the draft capital last year. Now you have a real chance to put your imprint on this team through the NFL draft. there's just not a quarterback for me personally in this draft that I feel comfortable giving up real assets for to go up.
Okay, I do think there's one potentially transcendent talent in this of that, and it is Anthony Richardson.
Right,
potentially
he has the most upside. Yes,
potentially.
Yes.
Okay, and I went back and looked at the Buffalo Bills traded up twice in the first round to get him. They gave up a lot. They went from 21, 23, somewhere there, to 12 with the Cincinnati Bengals. Gave up their first round pick, other picks and a player to get to number 12. All right. Then they had to trade from number 12 to number, I want to say 7, wherever they ended up to get Josh McDaniels. They gave up the 12th pick. They gave up 2 second-round picks and, something else, a couple other picks to then get Josh Allen. Now, if we go back to that draft, I think some of the same things that they were saying about Josh Allen are some of the same things that we're saying now about Anthony Richardson.
100%.
And here's the thing. This is the kicker to it all. Even if the Raiders or somebody were to trade up to number 3 to get Anthony Richardson or wherever they felt like they needed to trade up to get him, with all the flaws, just like Josh Allen, if you feel it's the guy, if you feel that's the guy, you got to do what you got to do. The Buffalo Bills did that. And look what's happened. They've got an MVP candidate. When he's healthy, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's been to an AFC championship.
An offense unto himself in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's and the tools with Anthony Richardson are there. Is it worth the risk at this point in time?
Right.
Right? Because the other side of that would be like RG3 with Washington. They moved up. He showed and injury, whatever it was, it didn't work out. And look at how far it sets you back.
Yeah.
So it's a heck of a decision. It is a heck of a decision to have to think about. But I'm with you, Vinny. I always felt like Bryce Young is the safest kind of, what he does well. Things are going to translate right away. But when you're talking about ceiling and upside, sure, Anthony Richardson is a little green, a little wet behind the ears, still didn't play a ton at Florida. But some of the things that he showed with infrastructure, with coaching, with development, you could see the apex and what it could become.
Yeah, so interesting to think about. And I think that's one of the good things about bringing in Jimmy G.
Yeah.
It lessens the urgency
right.
to maybe do something like that. Although I think, in talking to people like, Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, I don't think that they're going to do anything haphazardly, like, oh my gosh, we got to do this. We need a quarterback. I don't think that they would do. I don't think that's the approach that they would take. But if they feel Anthony Richardson's the next Josh Allen, we're going to move whatever mountains we got to move to go get him, I think they would do it. I'm not saying they will, but I think that would be the mindset.
Sure.
It would have to be that kind of conviction. All right, so the quarterback draft situation is a little murky right now because we don't know exactly what's going to happen at number 1 and number 2. I do think there's a possibility that the Raiders would trade up to number 3 if the guy that they do like is sitting there at number 3. Although I also think that they could stick with number 7. I also think that they might trade down.
Sure.
But obviously it always takes 2 to tango. An interesting, and as part of that, an interesting player is over in Henderson. We're taping on Wednesday. Jalen Carter.
Yep.
The Georgia defensive tackle is in Henderson visiting with the Raiders as one of the Raiders' top 30 visits. Each team is allowed up to 30 individual visits that they can bring into the facility for some further talking. And I don't think there's a player in this draft or many others who face a more important personal visit with the Raiders than Jalen Carter. And we've said this before, if you opened up the dictionary and looked up Raiders defensive needs, you might find a picture of Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
He's a guy that for more than a decade, the Raiders have needed a player like him and have fallen short time after time again, trying to find an interior defensive lineman who can wreak the kind of havoc that he can. We're talking about when things are going right, somebody that can be as disruptive as an Aaron Donald, a Jeffrey Simmons from the Tennessee Titans, Chris Jones from the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the caliber of player on film that Jalen Carter is. And imagine him inside of a Max Crosby and, for maybe one more year, Chandler Jones. That's a difference maker.
It's a total difference maker. It's a total difference maker for everybody on the field. It makes your pass rush better. It helps you in the run game. It gives more opportunity for your linebackers, and your DBs don't have to be as sticky. It changes. A disruptive defensive tackle still can change everything and anchor a defense in a really unique way. I think look, Vinny, I think it's the right thing to do. The Raiders have to do their due diligence. There is no harm whatsoever. We know about the situation at Georgia. We know about some of the similarities that there is to Henry Ruggs. We know about how it might play in this particular city. That being said, there is no harm whatsoever by being thorough and by doing due diligence. Because look, Jalen Carter's a 22-year-old kid, right? He's 22 years old, 21, 22. No, like should what happened at Georgia be a referendum for his entire life, right? Like there is potential for growth and for evolution to the next level, and it's incumbent upon the Raiders, regardless of what decision and regardless of what opinions, there's no harm in doing the due diligence.
Right, absolutely. And just to catch everybody up, Jalen Carter was cited, and this was he was cited for reckless driving and speeding, I guess, in conjunction with, in relation to a car accident that took the life of one of his former teammates at Georgia and then a recruiting staff member at the University of Georgia. They were misdemeanor charges. He's already been, hours of community service. There's a probation, part of it as well. That's one thing, all right? There's also the fact that, and that's here in Las Vegas, obviously, with the Henry Ruggs situation, speeding,
there's
car crash,
there's some sensitivity
tragedy,
to it for sure.
Absolutely. So we know what we're talking about as it relates to that. There's also he showed up out of shape at his pro day soon after all that had kind of come out with his role in that car accident, and then having to face some legal trouble. He shows up out of shape, can't get through his workouts. A little bit of a red flag there. I think if you watch the film play in and play out, there might be a little bit of issue of the motor running, and humming at a high level all the time. So there's concerns. There's red flags. If you're the Raiders and you're Josh McDaniels and you're Dave Ziegler, what do you got to hear from Jalen Carter today to give you peace of mind that he's going to be okay? Like you're okay drafting him number 7, because regardless of what he's done in the past, it's all about what he does in the future. What do you need to hear to give you a little bit of peace of mind that he's going to start making the right decisions rather than the wrong decisions moving forward? Year-round
commitment. This is a year-round job, right? The top guys, the guys that reach the pinnacle, the Patrick Mahomes of the world, the Aaron Donalds of the world. This is a job. This is year-round. They are in shape. They're working year-round. It is a totally bought in, totally committed. And that means making great choices away from the football field, right? It means making great choices. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy yourself once in a while. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy being in Las Vegas. It means doing it responsibly with the understanding that football is the priority, and it's going to be year round. So that's what I would need to hear. And then that's baseline, step one, and then you kind of go from there. But and also, that I'm sure they're having conversations about what actually happened in Georgia and what he learned, and why this was a mistake and problematic, and why, especially here, you got to be really careful in light of the tragic situation that involved Henry Ruggs and Tina Tintor. So I would need to hear all of it. I need to hear from the professional side what's going to happen, and that there's been the real personal growth and reflection about what happened as well.
Yeah, and I would having some sort of insight in how these things sometimes work. I don't think there's going to be any sugarcoating or tip-of-footing around. I think it's going to be a very frank and honest, brutally honest type of meeting. Because this is a huge investment.
Number 7
for the Raiders.
Pick.
Number 7, the
millions of dollars,
the public relations factor of it all, jobs that are tied into making those types of decisions.
No question.
And so you need to know, and you have to have assurances as much as you possibly can. There's nobody that can truly predict the future, but you got to be as close to Nostradamus as possible. If you're going to roll the dice at number 7 with Jalen Carter, that you know that this thing's going to work out. For those reasons, I'm a little dubious that it's gonna that's gonna be the pick at number 7.
Yep.
If he's even there, which I think that there's a case to be made that he would be. But it'll be interesting, and I think, like you said, they owe it to themselves. They have to.
It's still the right thing to do. Yeah,
because again, on film, just a dominant player that can change the trajectory of your defense. So Jalen Carter is visiting. He's one of 30. There's a bunch of guys that the Raiders have brought in, including pretty much all the quarterbacks. If they didn't bring them in personally for these top 30 visits, they went and saw them and met with them at their pro days and all that. If they do stay at number 7, and it isn't Jalen Carter, where would you? Do you have a lean here on where you would go?
I mean, this is a passing league.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the positions needed to stop a great passing attack, the Raiders have. They have an all-pro defensive end, Max Crosby, great pass rusher. You need a dynamic corner.
Yeah.
You need a dynamic corner in today's NFL. You do. I mean, you need a few, but you have to have one.
Right.
And it was an up and down year for Nate Hobbs. He might be a little bit better in the slot. What about a former teammate of his if he's available at number 7, right?
Right.
Devin Witherspoon?
Absolutely. I like Devin Witherspoon a lot. I don't know if he gets past Detroit. Detroit just traded
Jeff
Okudah, who was the 3rd pick overall just a couple of years ago. So they moved on from him, opening the door for them to potentially take Devin Witherspoon. So if Witherspoon is not there, then you're looking at Christian Gonzalez and Joey Porter Jr. I have just some rumblings that I've heard. What about maybe trading back and putting yourself in a position to land a Joey Porter Jr. who kind of plays what the Raiders are trying to do? He's a 6'3", 6'2", 6'3" press corner.
Yep.
I think that's what they're looking for. So he fits that bill, and maybe not at 7, but maybe at 13, 14.
And then you add value, right? When you are trying to build out pretty much the entire side of the ball, I want as many draft picks as possible, as many shots to throw at the dartboard. Because like we said, Vinny, it's an imperfect process. You don't know how skills are always going to translate. You do your best to evaluate, to predict, but that's what kind of the collective is doing, right? We're predicting based on past performance, what future performance is going to look like in a new environment. I want as many opportunities, especially if I'm at where like how the Raiders are right now, where you have a lot of positional needs on the defensive side of the ball. The more picks, the better. The more picks, the better. And then in case other players become available, you have more ammo for trades and whatnot. So I'm a big proponent of trading back.
All right.
I think there's a lot of value in trading back.
Now, one question.
Yeah.
Can you name the two starting cornerbacks for the San Francisco 49ers?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Can name me some defensive linemen for the San Francisco 49ers?
Nick Bosa. Armstead.
Now they got Hargrove.
Yeah.
They had a first round pick.
They've loaded up there year in and year out.
Huh. I'm not saying that the San Francisco 49ers don't have any good cornerbacks. I think they do. But I don't think any of those guys they're not household names.
No,
let's put it that way.
Right.
Like, so that's the question. Like, would you, if you're the Raiders, do you invest high at cornerback, or do you, with number 7, or even trading down a little bit, stick with the Tyree Wilson, defensive end, pass rusher from Texas Tech? Obviously, we talked about Jalen Carter. There's a path potentially, either maybe to trade up, or if you stay at number 7, depending on what happens ahead of you, and I'll describe this path. Maybe Will Anderson at number 7.
There you go. That's now, if Will Anderson falls at number 7, what's the path?
Okay.
Talk to me.
A team behind the Raiders trades up to number 3. A quarterback-needy team trades up to number 3 behind the Raiders, all right? So now you got whatever order you want to put them in, quarterback.
Okay.
Takes you to number 4.
Okay.
The Indianapolis Colts. Quarterback, right?
I mean, I think they'd consider it.
Or do they maybe... Yeah, let's just say they go for a quarterback.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So 4 quarterbacks go for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Takes you to the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks have 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. All right. Knowing Pete Carroll, all right, would that not be almost a perfect scenario for him to say, all right, we're going to roll the dice on Jalen Carter, because we also have another first-round pick and 2 second-round picks, so that in the event that it implodes, they still, they're like, all right, well, we took the chance there, but we hit on the next first round pick. We hit on the next the 2 second-round picks. Like there's some protection there.
Well, yeah,
his whole draft's not predicated.
And yeah, for sure. And then just as far in terms of the fit from Jalen Carter in Seattle, you take a look at on paper. They just brought Bobby Wagner back, one of the most respected veterans in the league, and Pete Carroll has a great culture that they're beginning to develop post Russell Wilson. He's a veteran coach, and you have a lot of veteran leaders on that defense. And
so let's pencil Jalen Carter
to
Seattle. Takes us to number 6. We just talked about the Detroit Lions trading their cornerback, their starting cornerback. They need a starting cornerback. They've got Hutchinson as a rush end that they drafted last year. Maybe they go cornerback right there. Whatever one. Gonzalez, Witherspoon.
Sure.
Will Anderson is sitting there number 7 for the Raiders.
I think, well, if the Raiders, I think that would have to be a dream come true.
Right?
You maybe get the best overall prospect in the draft. If he falls to number 7, he fills a positional need, right? Like you would love to have another pass rusher book to opposite Max Crosby. You don't have to trade up to get him. You keep your draft capital, and you can continue to build out from there, knowing you got your pass rush potentially solidified for the next 5 to 7 years.
I'm not saying it's going to happen, but
they need to be prepared for the scenario.
Yeah,
right?
and it makes a little that's in the realm.
It's not ridiculous.
So Seattle, although I do wonder, it's another place where Anthony Richardson, and I wouldn't even roll them trading up. That's another, because they do have so many picks. Do they roll the dice on the quarterback, knowing that they've got other picks behind them to offset it if it in case it doesn't work? And what a great situation for Anthony Richardson to go with Geno there and kind of learning under his wing. So look, here's the point: it's still so much volatility as it comes to the draft. We don't know what Houston's thinking. We don't know what the Carolina Panthers are thinking. I mean, Bryce Young. One day it's Bryce Young. One day it's the next day it's C.J. Stroud. What if the owner, who's been involved heavily in all this, fell in love with Anthony Richardson and looks at him and says, "I know Tepper wasn't there during Cam Newton's time, but I mean, that's somebody who kind of profiles."
There's some similarities. Yeah.
So what if they and then what happens at number 2? So still a lot to think about and to be prepared for. That's the perfect word. The Raiders have to be prepared for anything.
For all these scenarios. And that's why you do your due diligence on a guy like Jalen Carter. It's why you bring all the quarterbacks in or visit with all the quarterbacks. You don't know what's going to happen. Right. You have no idea. You never know. If there's an opportunity that arises, if somebody falls, you make sure you have the maximum amount of intel to make a decision that they feel is best.
We have all the answers. And one of which is that we're going to be back here next week to talk about whatever's happened between now and then, which takes us 1 week closer to the draft. I don't know if we're going to have any new kind of clarity, but it'll be interesting to do some poking around to see what Jalen Carter, how that visit went, with the Raiders. And I'm really curious at number 3 with the Cardinals and number 2 with Houston, what the thought process is behind that. But we're getting to the nitty-gritty part of the draft. We love it. By the way, next week, the Raiders start their off-season program.
Can you believe that?
Will Josh Jacobs be there?
That's $1 million question. You had a great story in today's Review Journal, VegasNation.com, updating our readers and football fans about where kind of things stand with the negotiations.
There is no update. Nothing's going on.
There you go.
So it looks like, he's locked in right now anyway, $10.6 million, $10.06 million on the franchise tag. I don't think he's necessarily happy about that, but it's not a good time to be a star running back.
No, it's not.
Entering your contract year or looking for a new contract, because the way running backs are valued monetarily now, it's just not the way. And when we were kids, man.
Premium position.
Earl Campbell, Walter Payton, Eric Dickerson, Tony Dorsett. Now, that's my kid.
For me, it was Marshall Faulk, Edgerrin James, Curtis Martin, Sean Alexander, LT, LaDainian Tomlinson, Priest Holmes, Larry Johnson. You had 15, 16, 1,700-yard backs, and they carried your offense.
Yeah,
the game's
teams
different.
Built their offenses around running backs, almost even more than quarterbacks.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
So the one team that didn't have great running backs, the Miami Dolphins, by the way, Larry Muir. I always felt like if Marino had a great running game, could have been a little bit different.
Maybe,
but so what are you going to do? I can't. Yeah, we're going to have to go all the way back to Mercury Morris.
Larry Zonka.
Right? He's not laughing very loud. painful memory for our great producer, Larry Muir, who is a big Miami Dolphins fan, and we don't hate him for that. All right, so Sam, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Vinny.
Larry Muir, always thank to you. STN Sports, STN Casinos, BlueWire.com, the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Thank you. Thanks to all our listeners, all our subscribers, for why we do this. We'll be back here next week talking about whatever might happen between now and next week as it relates to the draft and the Raiders as they continue to tinker with their roster. We'll see you guys next week.